This is me at Los Angeles Airport, 14th day of October, headed to Kyrgyzstan to hunt Marco Polo sheep and mid-Asian ibex. I met up with Kurt Burrows in the middle and Dave D'Onofrio on the left there, both from Alaska. They were my hunting buddies on this trip. We flew to Istanbul, Turkey, and then from there we flew on to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. You can see our route over to the camp. It was an 8-hour drive. We actually checked in at the VIP lounge at the airport, Manas Airport, and hooked up with our driver and Alexei, who was our guide. We stopped about halfway over there for food. This is a really interesting little cafeteria that we stopped at just along the road there, and they had quite the selection of food. You can see we got there at lunchtime, so it was busy when we got there. A lot of folks in there. And above the food counter there was a prayer that was written in Russian, the local Kyrgyz, and also English, and it is a Muslim prayer. The food selection was very good. We had lots to eat, lots to pick from, so we picked and we ate, had a good meal, most enjoyable. Our next stop was at this grocery store so we could pick up some supplies that we were going to take to camp and we were going to use there. I always like to go into places like this, but it gives you a real sense of what it's like at the countries that I visit. This is the grocery store. It was certainly well stocked, had lots of staples in it that you would assume because it's cold country in the middle out of nowhere, but you can see they had fresh fruit, citrus, grapes, lots of potatoes, and other things, but it was well stocked. This is Urumbai. He was my driver and got to be pretty close to him. He's pushing the cart, and you can see what we stocked on, beer and wine on the way to camp, which we enjoyed. The valley on the way was very flat and full of stock, but there were no barrier fences to keep the stock off the road, and we were constantly dodging cows and horses and sheep. We stopped to buy some apples along the way. It was October. It was apple picking season. So I thought some fresh fruit would be really nice to take into camp, and this lady was one of many people selling apples on the side of the road. This gives you an example of what the housing was like in this very rural area of Kyrgyzstan. Brick houses, but a lot of adobe brick that was used to make enclosures for, I'm sure, livestock or whatever they chose to do. This is the next stop that we made, and this is the game warden check stop, and they made sure that we were there and we had permission to go in and hunt. Ederbeck, who I'll show later, was the regional game warden, and he was actually the camp master. These are some of the local mountains, but we're just now coming out of the valley, and we head up to a mountain pass where we're about 12,000 feet. Of course, the first thing we did was have a flat tire. A lot of people looking at it, trying to figure out what to do, but they changed it out. We crossed over this mountain pass and headed down into the valley we hunted, and there was a statue of this mid-Asian ibex on one side and a snow leopard on the other. You can see there was lots of snow in the mountain, and there was snow down where we were, but it was very dry. Our next stop was this military checkpoint where they checked all of our passports and everything. We are only 12 miles from the Chinese border, and so they make sure that everybody comes in here is authorized to be here. This is camp. We finally arrived in camp. These are old work trailers that they have converted. They're normally mounted on wheels and chassis and pulled around, but they take the wheels off and they set them up, and they were bunkhouses, skinning rooms, kitchen, and the dining room. Here's the main dining hall. I've got other pictures of this, and I'll show you later, but this was the standard fare. I mean, they put out bread, and they put out, dried fruit and cookies and things at every meal. The sugar and the jams were for the bread or for the tea. This is the horse barn. I think they had some hay in here. I'm not sure. I never saw any, but the horses were all set up here during the morning where we took off from. This creek behind the horse barn is where we got all of the fresh water that they use to heat up, wash dishes, and wash our faces with. This is a view headed east out of camp where the creek behind us ran into a larger river, all snow melt. This is a view out of camp on the west side where the mountains were higher and towards China, actually. These adobe bricks were put up for an enclosure around a cow barn that was right above our camp. Cows would come in here, and, you know, again, these people are mostly herders, and their history is that. You can see the barn has hay on top of it, but they had used this to shelter the animals from the weather on occasions. Here's a video of our quarters. They were very comfortable. They were not really big, and they were not glamorous by any means, but they were certainly very comfortable. We had electricity at night from an electrical generator. This washstand was filled on a daily basis with warm water so we could wash our face, brush our teeth, and get ready. The coal-fired stove kept the place warm. They actually had somebody come in at night and stoke the fire and keep it going. This is where Kurt and Dave stayed, and this is my end. Lexi and I stayed at this end. You can see the electricity that we used to recharge our phones and cameras, etc. So it was very comfortable. It was very adequate. This is a video of the dining facility, and we had all of our meals in here that camp staff would eat after we did. This coal-fired stove, they always had a pot of tea on it, and they always had warm water that they were heating, again, to go into this washing. And this is Janelle and Salu. Janelle is the wife of one of the guys, and Salu is their daughter. This was the Russian-style spa, and of course it had a fire inside of it that heated the water that you used to bathe with. This was the entryway. Took your clothes off, and then you went inside the door into the chamber inside where they had hot water and they had cold water, so you'd mix them to the right temperature, you'd bathe, and then dry yourself or wash yourself off, get all the soap off. This was the outhouse, and I made sure that I got the wire that holds it to the ground because the wind was pretty brutal there from time to time and would blow these outhouses over. So you can see very rudimentary facilities, but they were adequate. This is one of two of the donkeys that was in camp. They had these two donkeys to pull a cart and haul things around, water and manure and stuff, and they named them Obama and Trump. So they had a sense of humor there, just like we do. This is the normal morning routine. The horses would be tacked up and they would head out. The one on the right there is Irkin. He was my guide. The horse on the left was my horse. These are the saddles that they use, but they put a big pad right over the top of the saddle, so they were very comfortable. They were not hard to ride on. Spent 8 to 10 hours a day in the saddle, but they were not difficult to ride on. After the horses were tacked up, we would ride off to the hunting area. You can see my guy. This is Irkin in front of me. He has my rifle, and I'm tethered to him. They would not let us steer these horses or ride them and command them, nor would they let us carry our own rifle. All of this, I'm sure, was for safety reasons, so that nothing would go wrong during the hunt. But these horses were absolutely amazing. We're at 12 to 13,000 feet. They would climb hills and stuff that I just couldn't believe they could go up. Every time they stopped, sometimes we would hobble them, sometimes we wouldn't, but they always started to feed on this very limited grass. This was a vista view of an area where we were going to hunt sheep. The first day was unproductive. I didn't get a sheep the first day. This is the second day that we're out. And the sheep are there because this remnants, this skull and set of horns were there on the ground. But we stopped here. We're going to hunt in those foothills that you see in front of us for our sheep. And that's exactly where we took that sheep, in these low foothills. The snow wasn't so bad. The sheep that we found, small herd, must have been 20 of them, and there was about 8 rams. This is my ram after I have shot him twice, and he still got up and walked up the side of that hill. The third shot, though, was a kill shot, and he rolled on down into this area on the ground. Very proud of this ram. I think he's about a 50-inch ram, give or take, and that's about average for this part of the world. The bigger rams are in other countries, Tajikistan, Mongolia, but this Kyrgyzstan ram is very typical, about 50 inches and very good. So here's Irkin and me. I show this because of the blood on my nose. I got too close to my scope and it bloused my eye. The next picture's of me and my ram. Again, I'm very proud of this ram. We got him down there, and so after we had him on the ground, we stopped and we had lunch, and after lunch, Irkin got busy and butchered that animal right there in the field. We packed up all of the meat, put it in a sack, put it on Irkin's horse, and rode back to camp. And this is all that we left in the field for the birds and the ravens and the foxes. I'm back in camp, and I've washed all the blood off my face, but you can see I was bloused pretty good. Got just too close to the scope. Here we are going IBEX hunting, and this is Urumbai, who I showed you earlier. He came with us so we could go hunt IBEX. We found a spot to hunt, and these were the spot where we stopped and tethered the horses so they wouldn't sneak off. This is a real good panorama of where we shot my IBEX, and as you pan all the way to the left, you'll get just a very quick glimpse of where I shot this ram. He was standing on the cliff right there, and I shot him, and he rolled down this hill, literally rolling out of sight down the side of that hill. And I told Irkin, I said, there's no way I'm going to go down that hill. And Irkin said, not a problem. And he climbed up higher and then started back down that hill. And he went all the way down, stopping periodically to peep over the edge. And you can see him going down there to see if he could see that sheep. And I'm sorry, that goat. He rolled all the way down out of sight, literally out of sight. And it scared me to death. There was no reason for Irkin to go down there. We could have killed another ram. But about 40 minutes later, he's coming back up. This picture doesn't show much, but he has the ram with him. He's caped him out. He said he got him just before he went over the very last edge, and he would have fallen all the way down to the bottom of the gorge there. And here he comes back out. Here's Irkin with my ram on his back. The horns are all splintered, and you'll see that a little bit better in another photo. And Urumbai rounded up his horse to go help him, but he didn't need the help. Here's my billy goat, my IBEX. I'm really happy. He's a very, very good trophy. Irkin, after he brought him up, we posed for a picture, but you can see the horns are splintered a little bit on the ends. This is the skinning shack back at camp, and there's my sheep and my IBEX. The other sheep on the left belong to Kurt Burrows. Here's the last day that those guys hunted. I was finished in 3. These guys hunted 2 or 3 more days, and this was the last day that they went out. That's Kurt on the left in white and Dave on the right. David killed his sheep, but he hadn't gotten an IBEX, and so he's going out to finish that off. Kurt had already finished his IBEX and his sheep. And here's Alexei. He's all dressed up for the snow. They were going to hunt in a snowy area, so you wanted to be as camouflaged as you could, and so there he was. I kind of took these pictures, I put these pictures in here. This is Dave and Alexei with his ram. Here's Kurt and Irkin Sr., who was my Irkin guide's uncle. And here's Kurt's IBEX. All really quality animals that they killed and brought in as trophies. Here's a picture of Kurt and Dave with their trophies before we left camp. Here's the crew before we left. There's skinners, there's guides, there's teamsters, these and the 2 cooks, Janelle and Salou, and Kurt's in there and Dave's in there and I'm in there. So it was quite a crew, but you can see how many people it took in camp to support 3 hunters. And here's Janelle and Salou, the cooks, as we got ready to leave. That day we left and went back to Bishkek was the 7th day that we had hunted. And of course it had snowed one day while we were there. We couldn't get out of town without getting stuck. On the way back, I took a couple of pictures. I've become a tourist now. These are yurts, and they're the typical tent structure that these nomadic people used when they were herding sheep and goats and etc. These are set up for tourists, and they were closed for the winter time. But I had to stop and take this picture. This is a cemetery. The country's Muslim, and this is a Muslim-based cemetery, but the pictures that you see on some of those headstones are traditional Russian headstones. But these cemeteries with these monuments were all over the place. Again, we struggled with sheep and goats and cows and creatures crossing the road, and we actually came across this herd of two-humped Bactrian camels that were on the side of the road, and of course they belonged to somebody, and they used them for beasts of burden. I don't know what. We didn't see them packed up. They were just out there grazing on the side of the road, and as you can see, no fences to keep them off the road. We stopped at a little convenience store on the way back into Bishkek, and here was an ATM. Here's inside that convenience store, no different than a 7-Eleven here in the United States, and it's certainly well stocked, had everything you need in there. We got back to Bishkek and we stayed at the Orion Hotel. I stayed there 3 days so I could be a tourist. The first day that we were back, Kurt and Dave were interested in changing their flight plans. We finished 3 days early. So they were interested in changing their flight and go back home, get back to Alaska and Portland, Oregon, where they live. And so we spent the first day getting them tickets, changing their flights and things like that, so that they could fly the next day. But I took this picture, this video of the hotel room to show you just how nice it was. I mean, Kyrgyzstan is really classified as a third world nation, but the Bishkek has got 1 million people in it, and this hotel was as nice as any hotel I've stayed in. The facilities worked. It was clean. It was neat. It had all of the modern conveniences, so it was very comfortable. Outside of the hotel was this public area, which I really enjoyed kind of walking up and down. They had vendors out there selling bread and things like that, but you can see the cars in the street, and it was a place where people took their kids and they played on the swings. After we got Kurt and Dave's airplane tickets squared away, we went to this shopping mall that Alexei took us to, and of course we had to buy the mandatory tourist items and souvenirs to take back home. I bought a bunch of fur hats that are traditional for the men to wear as sheep herders and their fur or rabbit trimmed hats. But you can see here they are catering to the tourist population that comes in there, no matter where they're from. But they had all kinds of ceramics, all kinds of glass, all kinds of party items in here. They had coats, they had shoes, they had just a little bit of everything. If you wanted it, you could get it in this store. So it was a nice stop to get in and see all of this items that they had. This was a fruit stand on the side of the road that I just, I thought I was impressed with. It has citrus, it has bananas, and this was inside. So, you can see the Snickers bar and the juice, and the refrigerator had milk and things like that. So it was, the stores were all well stocked. This gentleman is a street sweeper, and he obviously makes his own brooms and keeps the sidewalks swept off. This was the last meal with Dave and Kurt at Toro, and it was, meat, hamburgers, and things like that. And I had to sit down to get my picture taken in this chair, but it had a good meal. The next day they took off. Alexei was nice enough to set up a guided tour of Bishkek, and this was our tour that we took. We met a young man that took us on this tour. You can see that the streets are busy. Again, 1 million people. The statue there is Manas. Manas is either a legendary or a real person that was alleged to have united all of the different tribes in the country so that they would come together as a country. This is the main square in town, and the building in the center here was or is currently the government building, but the two buildings on the outside, when Russia ran the country, they were also communist buildings. This is a people statue. I have absolutely no idea what it means. This is the Supreme Court building, and you can see the old Russian hammer and sickle that was on it, and of course the current Kyrgyzstan flag. This is Frederick Engels and Karl Marx. There used to be a statue of Stalin here, but when he passed away, he was removed, and they put those boys in there. This lady is a national hero of some kind, and I'm embarrassed. I don't know who she is. The statue of Manas, the building behind it is a public building. Again, I'm not sure exactly what it is. Here's the main government building that is used today, which was the old communist headquarters party. Here's another picture, a statue of Manas. Manas, again, very important in the history of the country. And this is the arts museum or art studio back behind him, where they have public shows, etc. This is the government building where the Congress or Senate meets to manage the country. This is another people's statue that was on the tour that we passed by. Again, I have no idea what it's about. These two guys, these two soldiers, guarded the national flag that was out next to the Manas's statue, and they're there during daylight hours. They're not there overnight. It's not a 24-hour guard. Here's the statue of Manas again in front of the public building. And of course, what communist country would be without a statue of Lenin? And there he was. During the tour, we passed by this outdoor art sales area. These pictures are all painted. I wasn't interested in buying any because what would I do with them? Even if you rolled them up, I didn't have room for them. But I was just really impressed with the quality of the artwork. And of course, they kind of gave a historic view of these people, the local Kyrgyz people. This is a popular game where that's a goat hide with all the internals, and they use it like a soccer ball, and these horses race around, throw it in a goal. This is the public library, and this gentleman was being featured there. He's a local writer and is being featured there. This statue dates back to the communist era, the Eternal Flame, and I'm sorry I don't have any of the details on it and don't have any information on why it's there or what it's about. But this was lunchtime. Urumbai came by, and Alexei and Urumbai and myself had a really nice, very typical Kyrgyz lunch. And it was really the last time that I got to talk to Urumbai before we left. I left the next day. This is the public market in Bishkek. Alexei took me there, and in this market they have everything. This is what I would say is typical of our malls, or the substitute for our malls. Rather than have large malls, they have these outdoor open buying areas, and I mean, they had everything. You can see there's eggs, there's fruit, there's clothes, there's hardware, there's TVs, there's just about anything and everything. But in this open air market, you can see here's candy, here's cookies. If you wanted it, you could get it. And most of the people did their shopping here and in other places that I've been, European countries. They shop every day or every other day because they don't have large refrigerators or freezers where they maintain a lot of food. This is the bakery area, lots of bread. There's something there that looks like a cannoli, and I'm trying to explain in this to Alexei that the cannoli is a shell, and you stuff it, and you can see my gestures there. But as we worked our way down, we got to this next stand, and it was all Korean salads, and they had kimchi there as well, which is a fermented, pickled cabbage that is notorious or famous, the Korean dish. And these ladies, I don't think they're Korean, but that's what they were selling. This is all kimchi and Korean salads, etc. And once we got down here further, we came to another pile of sweets and cookies. I mean, if you wanted it, you know, any kind of candy, any kind of cookie, they were there. This is some kind of hallucinogenic. I think you put it under your tongue. It's like snuff or something, but it's not tobacco. It's something else. This is an example of the dried fruits and the nuts. They had peanuts. They had pistachios. These are all spices of some kind. You can see the cooking oil that they had. Spices, you know, they had all kinds of varieties. I don't know exactly what they were. Some of this actually looks like tea, but it was, you know, a wide variety. Here's one of the butcher shops. They had one of the butcher shops that was completely dedicated to horse meat. I don't think this is the one. I may not have a picture of it, and you can't tell the difference. It's all red meat, and it's all hanging on these hooks. But they had quite a bit of it, and the market was divided into sections like this. You know, they had a spice section, they had the meat section. These are all internal organs off of cows and sheep, and, you know, stomachs and kidneys and livers, etc. The tack here goes back to the fact that these people still consider themselves horsemen, and a lot of them still spend the summer in the hills, you know, working sheep and cows, just so they can get back to their roots. After this, Alexei talked me into getting a haircut and a shave. It was really nice, an interesting haircut and shave. They put hot wax in my ears and my nose, so I got a bikini wax on the hair in my ears and nose. The wax coming out of my nose left a tear in my eye. Here's Alexei and I at our last meal. We are actually at a Japanese restaurant having this dinner. This is my last day. The next day I got up and I flew to Istanbul. And once I got to Istanbul, I met Hakan, who was my guide, and this was my first meal in Istanbul. This is a red meat of some kind, and this is melted butter that's all over it, and some kind of grapefruit juice. So my introduction was really good. I was only there in the afternoon. I got there in the afternoon, so we didn't do any touristing stuff. We just kind of got started there. The next day we started off at the Suleimani Mosque. This mosque was built in 1550 by one of the Ottoman emperors, and it actually covered the old hippodrome area that was part of the old ancient Roman and Greek city. So it's typical of a lot of these old Roman facilities or buildings. They're built over the top of older ruins, and that's what this was. Istanbul, formerly known as Constantinople, is the largest city in Turkey and the country's economic, culture, and historic center. The city straddles the Bosporus Strait and lies in both Europe and Asia. This particular mosque is actually in Europe. It has a population of 15 million people and make up 19% of the population of Turkey. Istanbul is the most populous city in Europe and the world's 15th largest city. Interesting. It's founded by the Byzantine and Megarian colonies in the 7th century BC and renamed by Constantine the Great, the first emperor of the Roman era. During the official dedication of the city, he renamed it as Constantinople. The city grew in size and influence and became a beacon of the Silk Road and one of the most important cities in the history. It served as the imperial capital for almost 16th century during the Roman Byzantine era. That chandelier had ostrich eggs in it. Supposedly, they kept spiders away. This is the old marketplace outside the mosque, but it is now just a storage area around the mosque. Fascinating construction, though, again, built in 1550. This city was instrumental in the advancement of Christianity during the Roman and Byzantine times, hosting 4 of the 7 ecumenical councils. These are some of the graves outside of the mosque. This gentleman was selling tea. He was a vendor, paper cups, but he was selling tea if you wanted some tea. Interesting. This is the old ruins and museum for the old Roman era, when the Romans actually ran the city. They talk about a Byzantine palace, but the thing about this is that it had some of the most amazing complete works of mosaics still known today in the world, the Roman mosaics. This is part of them that you will see here. I think they're 6 to 8 inches deep, if I remember correctly, the lesson that I got from them. They're 6 to 8 inches deep. Of course, the earth is compacted, and then the stones are put in there one stone at a time to make the different images. But you can see in these images, here's a lion that's attacking a deer. They're very typical of the animals and the vegetation that were in the area. This is a piece that they picked up and they've set up for closer inspection. Of course, I had to have my picture taken to it. But this is the actual floor of the old Byzantine Roman temple or palace that was there, where the government palace was. And you can see the trees and the animals and the creatures that are there. Just absolutely amazing. This is one of the little open air markets, and of course, large city, these little open air markets were everywhere. We had to go down, had to look. They had everything in them. You can see jewelry, you can see spices, you can see sweets, you can see clothes. But this one happens to be open air. There's no roof on it. There's another one that we go to that has a roof over it. But here's a little spice market. You could buy all the spices that you wanted, that you didn't go to the, that was in Kyrgyzstan, the other market. But here's pillows, here's cushions, here's clothes. We had hired a guide to go with us that day to kind of take us around, and he took me into this store because I wanted to get some souvenirs now for the ladies that I know. So I ended up getting, I would have bought some of these shoes, but I didn't know what size everybody was, but I bought a scarf of all of the ladies that are in my life and my friends' lives. Beautiful. This I don't know what to call it, cupola, is outside the current Ottoman palace that when the Ottoman took over in 1453, they pretty much built a whole new palace and everything. This is St. Irene's. It's a church that's inside the Ottoman palace, and it was converted into a mosque, and then it's been cleaned up, and all of the Christian icons are there that you can see. But the construction is absolutely amazing. Again, this St. Irene's was built in like 550 BC, so it's very old. This was one of the seats for the Ottoman Caliph, who would sit on it and have court. This is the library inside the Ottoman palace. There were so many decorations. Of course, these are all in Arabic, and I took pictures of different things that I really can't explain. But this is the entryway from the Ottoman palace into the Hagia Sophia mosque, and this is where the Ottoman Caliph would sit when he came to the mosque. This mosque was built in 532 AD as a Christian church, and then when the Ottomans took over, it was converted into a mosque. And you can see the domes and everything. Here's this stairway that led up there. To the left of me is where the imam would stay. The sheets that you see right above my head cover up the old Christian artwork. I'll explain that later. This was 4 sheep, but these were originally represented the 12 disciples of Christ. And I took this just because of the flying buttress and the construction that went into this, 1,500 years ago. It's absolutely church was turned into a museum in 1931, and all of the old Christian artwork was uncovered. The Muslim religion doesn't allow icons, so there's no pictures of people or saints or anything like that in a Muslim mosque. This was cleared up, and the Christian symbols were put back in. This is pictures of the Blue Mosque, and the Blue Mosque is one of the central figures of Istanbul, but it was being reconstructed, so refurbished. It will hold 6,000 people, but we were not able to get into it, so all I had were these pictures from the outside. This is the Hagia Sophia Mosque, again, a Christian church built in 532 to 537 AD, and then converted into a mosque in 1453 when the Turks took over. Just absolutely amazed at some of the beauty, the detail. These are quartz tiles, ceramic tiles. I bought a couple of these at a store just for nice souvenirs for myself, but the work, the detail, absolutely amazing, and dome after dome that was decorated and painted and displayed. Just absolutely amazing how high some of these were. This table was in the palace, and it is a marble table, and it was used to prepare food. Some of these are kind of out of order. This is again the kitchen, and this is where the exhaust for fires. Inside the Ottoman palace, where they prepared the food and fed 3,000 people every day. Amazing. This is the gate entryway into the inner sanction of the Ottoman palace that was built after 1453, when they took the town of Constantinople and renamed it. Again, these are religious icons in the mosque that have been were plastered over by the Muslims, but 1931, when the mosque became a museum, they were cleaned up and they were restored to their former beauty. Again, you can see the curtains in the back that cover them up when it was a mosque, and it's now being redesignated as a mosque again. This is one of the angels that's up in the corner, but again, the Muslims don't allow icons in their churches or in their mosques, so they'll be covered up by curtains rather than plastered over again. Again, another one of the domes inside there. I had to take this picture because this was actually a single carved piece of marble to make that vessel. The mosque, I'll talk a little bit more about Istanbul here. The city was instrumental in the advancement of Christianity during the Roman and Byzantine times, and hosted 4 of the 7 ecumenical councils before it transformed to an Islamic stronghold following the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The second day we were there, we went to, we're still in this is the Hippodrome, where they had chariot races, just like on the old movie Ben-Hur. That pillar was actually covered in brass originally, and you can see the chariots carved into the marble base. These would be the leaders and the people who would be there at the Hippodrome watching the horse races and things like that. This is a obelisk that was actually carved in Egypt, and it's at the other end of the Hippodrome where they had these horse races. This is a cistern, so when the city was actually under siege, they had dozens of these cisterns that were full of water. Now it's been converted into a museum. And on top of this museum was this weaver shop, and this guy was nice enough to bring us in and show us some of his works, and tried to sell them to me. This is a knotted rope, a knotted rug. But these rugs were absolutely beautiful, but they were very expensive, and so I opted out of those. This lady is tying one of those knotted rugs. The pattern is on top, but each one of those pieces, that's the pattern, she ties a knot at each place, and then of course she can trim that. This is my meal the second night. Again, another meat course, served over the top of bread. Another great meal while I was there. The next day, the second day, we went to the ancient town of Ephesus. This is the marker that marks the center of the town, and every piece of property was measured in distance and direction from that center market. This is the main auditorium or coliseum in the city. It would seat 30,000 people. They think at one time the city had the largest inhabitant, or the largest population was between 100 and 130,000. This is the main road, and I'll show you a little bit more of it, that comes in from the old port off of the Aegean Sea, and that's why this city was there. It was a center for trade. Ships would come in from the Aegean Sea, they would dock, and then they would come up this main road. This main road, not this one, this is a tourist road, but here's the main road, and all of the commerce travel, horses and carts would come up this way. There was a bathhouse at the very end of it. You couldn't come into town off the sea until you took a bath. Columns were all along here, and here's Hakan on the right, and RD, my guide. This is the temple, the library of Celsius. Supposed to be 3 stories high, but this is all they've been able to reconstruct. Ephesus was founded as an Attic Ionic colony in the 10th century BC on a hill known as the Sulak Hill, 3 kilometers from the center of ancient Ephesus. Today, the city of Seljuk is there. The mystical founder of this city was a prince of Athens named Andronicus. This is Nike, the goddess of winning. This is a early depiction of the snake and the column, which was later adopted as the symbol for medicine. So they believe that this particular statue was outside of an old medical facility. This is a backgammon board carved out of marble that was in one of the 2 agoras, which is, city areas, meeting places. These are old terracotta pipes, and they use these terracotta pipes to carry water and heat and steam. These are the Pillars of Hercules, and these are on the commercial or the footpath that led to the top of the city. These are the ruins. They've been rediscovered and rebuilt in the 20th century, but there are pieces of marble everywhere, and these are old crypts. But the marble is being identified wherever they excavate it. They mark it and they identify it and they put it somewhere so it can be used again. About 650 BC, Ephesus was attacked by the Sumerians and razed the city to the ground, including the temple of Artemis. After the Sumerians had been driven off, the city was ruled by a series of tyrants. Following a revolt by the people, Ephesus was ruled by a council. The city prospered, and under the rule at that time, about 560 BC, Ephesus was conquered by Lydians under King Croesus, who thought a harsh ruler treated the inhabitants with respect and even became the main contributor to the reconstruction of the Temple of Artemis. His signature is found on the base of one of the columns. This is the Temple of Hadrian. Again, they're trying to put all of this back together. Later in the same century, the Lydians under Croesus invaded Persia. The Ionians refused a peace offer from Cyrus the Great, siding with the Lydians. After the Persians defeated the Croesus, the Ionians offered to make peace, but Cyrus insisted that they surrender and become part of the empire. They were defeated by the Persian army in 547 BC. When Alexander the Great defeated the Persian forces at the Battle of Granicus in 334 BC, the Greek cities of Asia Minor were liberated, and the pro-Persian tyrant Sirpax and his family were stoned to death. Alexander was greeted warmly when he entered Ephesus in triumph. When Alexander saw that the temple of Artemis was not yet finished, he proposed to pay for it. The river silted up the harbor and it lost its value. This is an advertisement that they say would led to a house of prostitution later on. The guides all say that. I don't know. Here's the public toilet off of the Colosseum area, and it had constant running water in it, so it washed the waste away. These sewers were actually backed up to destroy the old city. Here's Nike again, and here's RD, my driver, with his Nike shoes. Unable to read everything, but these are the old living quarters that they are trying to excavate. There's so much to be done here. They can only do so much, and COVID has stopped all the excavation and the regeneration of this building. But you can see all of the pieces that have been pulled and identified and set up to be restored. And these are old living quarters, and these are, probably some of the nicer, richer people. This is a marble floor. Here's a fountain that was in it inside the home. This is an artist's depiction of what the room would look like when it was fully decorated and taken care of. Pretty interesting. This is as it stands today. But a lot of work. You can imagine all the work that went into this, 1,500 years ago when they were building these facilities. Here's some of the alcoves, things like that. I want to say more about the city of Ephesus. Ephesus was really important to the Christian world. There were 7 different mystical councils. This is a cooking pot, and the disciple Paul wrote papers here when he was there, and later when he was in Rome he wrote a letter to the Ephesians. After we finished Ephesus, we went to the open air market in the local city that's outside Selçuk. I'm quite sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But again, another open air market, and they had all kinds of stuff here. This is dried figs and dried nuts and things like that. And this next stand is mostly there's more dry figs. The next stand is mostly cheese, and I asked him if this cheese was goat cheese or sheep cheese, and Hakan told me that most of the cheese that they sold here in this facility was milk. Goat milk, cow milk that they made the cheese out of. But again, this was Saturday, and so there was, everybody was out at the market buying food for the week, etc. Most enjoyable, and you can see again it's well stocked, lots of grapes. They would certainly make their own wine. These look like table grapes to me, but they could have been used for wine. You can see there's citrus, fresh vegetables, most enjoyable. But we took a long tour. I don't think we bought anything. I think Hakan bought some things. Then Hakan and RD and I sat down for lunch. This was a typical Turkish lunch. All these vegetables came out and plopped down in front of us, and after we got started on the vegetable, then the meat course came out, and the meat was, 4 or 5 different kinds. This cat is typical. They have they feed these cats and dogs in all of the cities, and they roam free. They don't belong to anybody. I thought it was really interesting. No dog catchers or cat catchers. Now we're back in. This is our 3rd day that I'm a tourist in Istanbul, and we're back into a covered market. And it's a pair of shoes that I bought for Hakan. He bought them. He wanted them for a friend of his. But here's the Turkish delights. There's all kinds of food. We just really had a good time. This is a covered market, so it's a little more sheltered. We had our final meal there, which was an interesting restaurant where you could only get they only served one kind of food. They served bread and meat and French fries and you had beer, and that was it. You couldn't get anything else. But it was really good. Here's an example of I took these pistachios because we grow so many here in the valley, and Brian O'Neill grows them for a living. These are the Turkish delights. We had those after our dinner. And then the last thing that we did was we took a boat cruise down the Basra Straits. These are the fortifications that are on the European side, where the Romans and the Greeks first built them, and then the Ottomans actually improved them. This is a mosque that's down on the river that we went by. This was a nice tour. A lot of people like to come and go swimming, but it was now 31 October, and it was cold. This is the Winter Palace, which is down, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump down. And this is the Summer Palace, which is just a little bit further down the road, all built by the Ottomans. And the guide seemed to think, Khan seemed to think that the Ottomans did this so that they could impress the Europeans and make the Europeans think that they were just as powerful and big as the big European countries of France and England and Germany and Russia. These are the fortifications again. These are on the European side. I think I have a picture of the fortifications. Yeah, this is the fortifications on the Asian side, on the other side of the river, I think. I took so many pictures I don't know. This is the hunting lodge, yeah, so those others would have been. This is on the other side. This is on the Asian side of the Basra Straits. Beautiful place. I don't know how much hunting they did out of it, but it was a place for the Ottomans to go. We got inside, but we couldn't take pictures. They were very serious about no taking pictures, so we didn't take any pictures. So we went all around the outside. We took a tour of the inside. This is the backside of it next to the Basra Straits, and the lady in green is a bride. She's getting married. She actually fussed at us because we were in the picture, kind of in her way, so she didn't appreciate that. This is the fountain that she was standing over the top of. They'd taken all the water out of them because it's winter and they didn't want them to freeze. But this was our last mosque that we went to, and this one is a modern mosque. It was actually built in 1934 and was built on the Asian side. I guess they felt like it was important that they had a mosque on that side. This is the Grand Kamalika Mosque. It was built in 2013 and built on the Asian side, like I said. There was a young lady whose name was Imam who helped us. The balcony here is where the women pray. Again, the Muslim religion is very secular. It's men and women, so the women had to pray on the second floor on the balcony, and the men were allowed to pray on the floor here. But this young lady came over and she gave us a tour and talked about it and how it worked. But you can see just how amazing it was. This area right here under this is where you wash your feet and your hands before you actually came in for services or even to be a tourist if you were a Muslim. I did not, but this is all marble. Just an absolute beautiful place. You can understand how this could be built in modern times versus old times when they had no hydraulics. This is where the imam would stand and give his lecture during the day. This is the little girl. Her name is Imin, and she was nice enough to give us a tour and show us the way around. Very nice. This is actually St. Anthony's. And St. Anthony's was built in 1725 by the local Italian community of Istanbul and was later demolished and replaced with this current building. Along with its adjacent buildings, it was built in 1906 and 1912 in the Venetian neo-Gothic style and was likewise edified by the local Italian. There's a picture, here's a statue of St. Anthony. But Pope John Paul originally had come here and spoke. This is the bridge that crosses from Europe to Asia. You can see how well I was taken care of on this tour. And I was the Lone Ranger. There was nobody else on my tour, just me. But an amazing hunt, an amazing tour, and here I am at the Pillars of Hercules, gaining enough strength to go back home. Great trip, fun, good trophies in the end.